Welcome to the BrainStoke Podcast. It's a show about the stories of struggle and stoke of people who inspire us. I'm Preston Niederhauser.
And I'm Tom Telford. The BrainStoke Podcast has a simple mission: deliver a daily dose of mattering to all who listen. Welcome to BrainStoke.
Dude, what's up with our logo, though? Is it a B? Is it an S? Is it a 5? Is it a tribal mask? Is it a warrior? Or is it a brain?
I know, it's rad, right? But this is no BS joke. This show is about the science of stoke. No, for real, the 5 S's. A shout out to the brain's all-natural free dose of happy, aka serotonin. Sponsored by sleep, sun, sweat, sex, and stoke. We're parents too. We get it. During the episodes where we talk with children or about children, and your kids may be listening in, we'll make sure that we use the word squeeze instead of sex. And the title of those episodes will have something to do with being Grom Stoker rated.
What are the episodes actually going to be about? A daily dose of stories, knowledge, and inspiration to stoke dose dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins.
I love it.
Your daily dose.
The daily dose. Let's start by thanking our Stoke sponsors. Aspire, a network of mental health companies, is split into 2 companies. One, Aspire Counseling Network, provide all types of therapy. John Howard and Carson Kinney help run Aspire Counseling Network along with Marlene Kinney, who's the president. John and Carson are mental health clinicians. They've spent their entire careers serving the mental health community. And we're stoked to have them on the podcast because their knowledge and experience is going to be huge for our listeners. Thank you, John, Carson, and Marlene. And we look forward to having you in.
Hey, John, we'd love for you to be on the podcast. We're looking forward to having you sit down and share some of your Jedi mind tricks that you've got to help us. We're looking forward to having John on the podcast. John is the creator of the original 5 S's, and those are what we live by. So it's going to be awesome to have him sit down and explain more of the science behind the 5 S's and why they actually matter. So that'll be a great opportunity when we have that time to sit with him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. You know what's interesting about John? John is a twin, and John's brother owns the bike shop in Ogden.
That's right.
So Stoke runs through the Howard blood, and it'll be cool to have John in, not only because of his knowledge in the mental health space, but the dude loves bikes.
He can speak our lingo.
He speaks chain ring bling for sure. So it'll be fun to have him in. Aspire Medical is a mental health medication assessment and medication management company. Aspire Medical is run by Beth Waldron, Andrea Beckstrom, and Stacy Davies. And at some point, we'll have them in because these are incredibly knowledgeable women. And I'm excited to have an all-women executive team into BrainStoke because they have an incredible knowledge base being mothers and running a company. And I think that'll be fun to have them in to hear more about that.
We've also got to thank the Utah Cycling League. We love the league. We've been involved with the league for almost 10 years. We love the impact the league has on our teens and families throughout Utah.
Whether coaching, parenting, or riding with teams, Preston and I love Utah high school cycling. It's near and dear to our heart and all the people who are involved in it. Thank you so much, Utah Cycling League. We look forward to our relationship with you in this upcoming season.
Tom, is this going to be a podcast just about Utah Cycling League?
No, we're stoked about cycling all the time. That's who we are. That's what we do. We love it. But this isn't just about cycling. This is about something much bigger. This is about people and the inspiring stoke and struggle stories that they have in their lives. We want to hear them. So if you've got a story, whether individually, as a group, we want to hear the stories that inspire all of us. And so please reach out to us. We'd love the opportunity to have you in studio, whether an interview or hearing the story in one way, shape, or form or another. This is stories that, are part of all of our lives.
You can hit us up on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, our website, brainstoke.com, all social media avenues.
Yeah, reach out to us through any of those channels for sure. So ultimately, what kind of interviews are we looking for? I mean, who's our dream team of interviews that we would have on the podcast? We might as well just get it out there, see what happens.
Lindsey Vaughn, are you out there?
Yes. Actually, now that we're on the topic of Utah high school cycling, this last year, there was a super cool movie made called 8610, which was Braden Bringhurst was riding the famous whole enchilada backwards, and he documented it. And although the story is about mountain biking, the thread that we were intrigued about at BrainStoke was Braden's commitment mentally, what it took him mentally. And he has an awesome story. So Braden, if you hear this podcast, we want you, man. Let's get you in studio and hear it. Who else would we want?
Johnny Collison?
Johnny Collison.
Johnny.
Got a list.
Johnny and Angel Collinson, Utahns. That would be fantastic to have them in.
Once we hit it big, we want Julie Hanks on here.
Julie Hanks.
Julie de Azevedo, right? You remember when she
Julie
she did all that?
de Azevedo
Yeah.
Hanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another mental
Under the
health
hyphen.
guru that is like, I would be starstruck. Like in my mind, I've got like 2 or 3 people that I would be totally starstruck over, like seeing. One of them is JFF, Jennifer Finlayson Fife.
Mm-hmm.
She is a Jedi of mental health and mind tricks. So yeah, that would be so great to have in studio. It's interesting because we're joking in studio right now about these, influencers, famous athletes, people who have such a voice advocating for mental health, and their stories themselves are inspiring. But in reality, when we were dreaming up, BrainStoke Podcast, it was really about everyday people who have inspiring stories of struggle and stoke, who those stories may not necessarily ever be told, but every one of us have been on social media before, and someone we don't even know shares their story, and we're all of a sudden in tears because, these are people who are just battling, to live life and to do their thing. And so although we are aspiring to bring some inspiring people in who have accomplished some pretty amazing things in their lives, it is everybody's stories that we're interested in telling who have overcome, mental health challenges and continue to fight for accomplishing great things in life. So we want to hear your stories. Submit them, reach out to us. That would be fantastic to hear, Utah's stories of struggle and stoke. What else?
Talk about the 5 S's. Why did those matter? Why did you decide on those five things? And why did they mean something to you?
So a quick story. Preston and I happen to find ourselves on our bicycles often, whether chasing dirt on mountain bikes or on our road bikes. And one afternoon we were on road bikes. And we're pedaling along together, and he was asking me what I'm up to. And I am a co-owner of the Aspire companies that are, mental health companies, mental health focused, whether therapy or medication management. And I was telling him about the struggle of Aspire Medical and Counseling. And that is that ultimately the patients and clients of those companies, when they come in to see a mental health professional, they are in struggle. They are in the struggle at the time. they may be broken mentally. And, what a great thing for Aspire to be able to help these people. But I was telling Preston this day on our bikes, I want to get, out in front of the broken or the problem or the struggle. I wish that teens today had some proactive mental health tools that if they were aware of them, they would be able to use them as they go through the struggle so that they wouldn't end up broken or, in a traumatic situation where they now needed help. Don't get me wrong. I want anybody who needs the help to go in and see a mental health professional. But Preston and I spent that ride that day talking about, is it possible to teach kids mental health tools that were cool, that had a cool factor to them? We even kind of joked as we rode our bikes along that day, wouldn't it be awesome if kids believed that the sexiest body part was not abs or chest or incredible biceps, that they believed and embraced the brain being the sexiest and most attractive body part. Attraction to other people starts in the brain. Attraction to clothing, to music, all of those things start in the brain. And so as we rode that day, we just thought, through in our own minds, kids need to understand how the brain works, and so that they can cue into, these tools that allow people to get through life and to do it in a happy way. So all that to say, the 5 S's are representative of ways that the brain receives serotonin. So sleeping, sweating, working out, getting outside in the sun. Right now in the state of Utah, we haven't seen the sun a lot during the winter. It's amazing. Our stoke is high, sun is low. And so I actually take a supplement for getting sun, which is vitamin D. The other one, is sex. And although that's an interesting topic to try to, cover among teens or parents in the state of Utah, there is just a science to it, and understanding that is important. We're not encouraging kids, to be sexually active, but on the podcast, we're at least going to teach the science of it. It's just truth. And if we're afraid to talk about the truth, then that's going to be a challenge, for kids, as they grow up. And so there will be topics, that are discussed on sex. As we said before, when kids are involved or we're talking or interviewing kids, we'll talk about squeeze. In the end, the reason that serotonin happens from sex is human touch. Squeeze, a hug, a hand on a knee, parents, touching their children and hugging them. Touch is serotonin. So we just use the word sex or squeeze because it fits with the other 5 S's. And then the last one is stoke. Now, of all the of all the S's, we're going to get some brain scientist, some brilliant person who's going to come on and they're going to go, yeah, serotonin doesn't come from stoke. And I'm going to argue with them because when I'm doing things that I'm stoked about, when I'm on my bike, when I'm running, when I'm, skiing or doing things with my friends that I love, when I feel stoked, I'm happy. So although I don't have proof of stoke, I'm a believer. I am absolutely a disciple of stoke. So those are the 5 S's: sweat, sleep, sex, stoke, and what did I miss?
Sleep, sun, sweat, sex, stoke.
Okay.
A disciple of stoke. Amen, brother.
Welcome to the Church of Stoke.
Yeah. This is the Church of Stoke. And we look forward to worshiping with all of you. So yeah, what else? What else does listeners need to know?
Why do you want to do it? Obviously, we talk about it. But
I'll
go ahead, Preston.
I'll jump in there. The question was asked, why do we want to do this podcast? And maybe I can speak for both of us, but I know for me, as I've been a coach of teenagers, had the opportunity to witness kids go through challenges that you wouldn't really wish on anybody. And you discover that your next door neighbors are dealing with challenges that seem almost unimaginable as a teenager. And your heart breaks for them. And you wish you could help them understand how to properly cope with whatever they're dealing with. So I love and care for youth. And I think by doing this podcast and sharing these stories and helping these kids realize they're not alone and that other kids might experience similar feelings, other adults might experience similar feelings, I think they can find strength in that. And as they hear stories of how people have overcome challenges, I think those types of stories can really benefit and lift up anyone that might be struggling.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, the reason I want to do the podcast is because I have my own story and journey of mental health. And, you know, when I was growing up, I had reading and learning disability. You know, I was never diagnosed with dyslexia, but that's because I don't believe my parents probably ever told me. But I was seeing tutors and I was spending time with professionals who were helping me with my learning and reading disability. And my own journey of low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, all of those things that are normal about growing up, I wish that I knew more when I was growing up about how my own brain worked. And so the reason that I want to do this is because there's nothing more important, in my opinion, for teens and youth today than to know that they matter, regardless of whether they are an athlete, a non-athlete, whether they're smart or, you know, the low end of the totem pole in terms of their IQ. Wherever you are in your life, at this point in time, you need to know that you matter. And so I hope this podcast is all about that. You know, I spend a lot of time on social media talking about matter or mattering or mattership or, you know, this week I had a woman reach out to me and she said, you know that mattering isn't a word, nor is mattership. And you're going to hear that a lot on this podcast. We just make stuff up, but we make it up because we believe that teens and youth, they get it. Whether they're the right words or not, people know what it feels like to matter. And that's universal. And so I want to do this podcast because I want people to feel that they matter. And in my opinion, there are two ways for people to feel that they matter. One, through literally the science of mattering, which is when you have your daily dose, when you feel the happy chemicals in your brain from serotonin and the other chemicals, that is going to help you feel better, that you matter and that you're happy. So that's number one, is understanding the science behind feeling like you matter. And the second is your stories. People are inspired by hearing the stories of struggle and stoke, the things that you struggle with that are hard, that you have to face and overcome. They're also inspired by things that, you know, make you feel stoked, you know, like doing a hard mountain bike race or overcoming something huge in school that was a challenge for you. When people feel stoked, they feel like they matter and that life matters to them. And that's what this is all about, is understanding the science of mattering and two, you know, hearing the stories that inspire us in our life. So that's why I want to do this podcast. What would be ultimately the best outcome, aside from the fact that we have more than 4 episodes and we pack it in? What would be the best outcome other than that this show becomes wildly popular? What would be the best outcome for you, Preston?
That we reach our target audience of the teens, and that they hear the stories and they believe that they can overcome, that they understand that they matter, that they realize that they have worth and value, and that they don't want to quit. They don't want to give up.
I love that. That's awesome. You know, the other outcome that would be ideal is that by Preston and I sharing our C- parenting capability and being super vulnerable with all the mistakes that we have made and telling and sharing our own stories of the parent struggle, that parents learn something and take away some tools that allow them to become the brain stokers in their own household. You know, it would be awesome if we had lots of parents who listened in and they ultimately became the BrainStoke coaches in their own household. And we are constantly learning, you know, as parents. And I hope that this becomes a hub for parents to listen into it. And they're hearing things that they embrace as tools in their own household. And so ultimately, the number one goal, like Preston said, is to appeal to teens and that they learn something that is going to help them, you know, in their own lives. And secondarily, that parents, you know, are gaining some tools as well that helps them to be better parents. If we were to frame this up the right way, and one, we survive, two, we appeal to a target audience, who would be the best sponsor and partners that not just that would allow us, you know, to create a good podcast and it for, you know, that it would survive, but ultimately great sponsors and partners who would be fantastic in helping the message get out there and broader embraced by teens and parents in the state of Utah?
That's a really good question.
So I pose it, and because if you hear this, listening audience, and you're curious, we would love for you to share with us who we should partner with. By the way, we're not looking for a massive revenue stream to do it. We're looking at partners who can help spread the message. And if you have tools that are going to help teens and youth with their mental health, you're a great partner for us. So that's ultimately, you know, who we're looking for. And so when we have met strategically and we've talked about, you know, who are great partners for us, the conversation went something like this. If the roles were reversed and we were back in our 17-year-old shoes, how would a podcast have to be done? What would have to be shared? And ultimately, how would it have to ultimately listen to me or hear to me for me to want to chime back in? And ultimately, when I put on my 17-year-old hat again, here's what's important to me: my friends, my music, the activities that make me feel stoked. Think like your inner 17-year-old, and ultimately it'll take you back, you know, to what's important to you. You know, in other words, what matters to a teen. And this week I was writing about mattering again. And it was interesting. There's an author who wrote the movie called, you know, A Fault in Our Stars. And he was writing about, you know, these two teens and ultimately what mattered to them. And, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, you know, you're going to cry your eyes out. But ultimately, what he was saying is that what matters to you defines your mattering. In other words, if you want to feel like you matter, then ultimately you have to decide like your purpose or your passion. Ultimately, what matters to you is going to help you feel like you matter. And so when we put on our 17-year-old hats again and we think through what matters to us, this podcast needs to be about that. Teens want to be again with their friends. They want their music. They want to wear cool, duds. That was like a 90s term. The term now would be what?
Drip.
Their drip, right? Their clothes, the cool factor of their clothing. And so drip is important. Food is important, right? I think about a 17-year-old and endless, pit of the ability to eat. And the other factor is influencers, right? Fame, hip hop artists, athletes, people that are on TikTok, people that are on YouTube, Dude Perfect, all of that stuff are factors in what matters to kids. And so when we think about partners or, the type of audience, that we are thinking about, it is a combination of those things that matter to kids. You have to put your inner teen, hat back on and think like a teen. And so, if you are connected to influencers, if you are connected to those things that matter to teens, we would love to talk to you. You would be a fantastic partner for us. Come coach us, mentor us, help us as we try to grow this.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here today. We appreciate you joining with us in listening to these stories of struggle and stoke. And we look forward to having you here with us next time. Welcome to BrainStoke.
Welcome to BrainStoke.
Welcome to BrainStoke.